All right, let's talk about unemployment. And unemployment benefits end today. These were the executive order unemployment benefits rolled out by President Trump just a few weeks ago. A lot of states had a difficulty getting that money from FEMA to begin with, but those unemployment benefits end today, and this week is when they will dry up. With no other stimulus plan in place, we are headed for an unemployment disaster. And why the mainstream media isn't talking about perhaps the biggest story around these unemployment numbers is surprising to me. And it's not just about the unemployment numbers, which I think those numbers are fake to begin with. They're not accurately reporting the true number. That true number includes permanent job losses. Now, anytime over the years when I've ever covered those jobs numbers on the air, I always made it a point to say that when you hear about this unemployment number being, 8.4%, et cetera, that number does not include the people that have given up, have stopped looking for work, are not part of that system anymore. They have filed for pandemic unemployment assistance under the PUA program. They might be contract workers or gig employed workers. So they don't have permanent health care. They're working on as a freelance, sort of on a case-by-case basis. Those people have lost their jobs permanently and have now been applying for the PUA program. Well, guess what? Those numbers aren't counted in the broader unemployment numbers. Why? Because those people have their jobs are gone. And so these are permanent job loss numbers that are not included in this data. I find it very interesting that the New York Times actually reported this in their story recently. They actually wrote about this in their story about the coronavirus updates. Here is the quote. In fact, there were individuals who ended up then sharing this online, and this was uncovered, great work by the Status Quo YouTube channel. Permanent job losses are mounting, they said. There are a large number of people who are being sidelined and could fall out of the labor force, according to this New York Times piece. That was a direct quote. Permanent job losses are mounting. There are a large number of people who are being sidelined and could fall out of the labor force. So they were talking specifically about the permanent job loss numbers. Guess what happened, though? A short time later, journalists went to go pull that quote directly from that article again, and guess what? It was gone. The New York Times just totally removed it. They removed the economist. They removed the professor whom they were quoting in that story. Forbes, in fact, had linked to that article separately in a separate piece and highlighted the fact that this data point was stark, that these jobs numbers are wrong because they don't reflect the larger number, which is the permanent job loss number, which has remained consistent week after week after week, but no one's talking about it. If you watch Fox News, you won't hear about this permanent job loss number, and most of the mainstream media isn't talking about it, and I don't know why. I don't know if it sort of undermines their corporate masters. I can't get it. But the New York Times just removes that entirely from their article. The number that no one is talking about is this permanent jobs loss number. And it's how it's tied directly to this lack of stimulus, by the way. So last week, we saw 1.7 million new unemployment claims filed. And yet some stories lied to you and told you that it was 884,000. That was the number they were telling you. They're like, oh, that was slightly good. That was not bad. But that didn't take into account all of the people that stopped looking for work. Those people are removed from the data set. Just to give you some more reference here, the record all time, was 600,000 jobs lost. And that was like 20 or 30 years ago. And now it's week after week after week that we have near 1 million jobs lost permanently. We continue to remember the most important number of all is this permanent job loss number, but you're not going to hear the president talking about it. And I'm surprised we're not hearing more Democrats talking about it, but we're not. A lot of people who are applying under the PUA program are actually contract workers, and so they're getting these gig workers. So what we're really doing is underreporting the amount of new unemployment claims that have been filed across the United States. This permanent job loss number is continuing to tick up, and it continues to go and accelerate faster than any time in American history. No one is talking about this. It's faster than it was in 2008. It's faster than it was during the dot-com boom and bust. This permanent jobs loss figure, the problem with it, folks, is that it takes months, if not years, to replace those jobs. So this is not like furloughed workers who are temporarily pushed to the side and then return to work. These are permanent jobs that are gone forever and take years for those people to get back to work. Do you remember what happened after the 2008 recession? I remember interviewing people on our show. We did a lot of jobs segments during the show back in 2008. And one of the common refrains was, my skills have dried up. And now when I'm applying for that same job that somebody younger who has more fresh skills and who can work at a cheaper rate than me, they're getting the job. And now I'm having to change careers entirely or come up with something entirely new to do because, less expensive employees are now taking over those jobs, younger millennials, et cetera. And these 40, 50, 60-year-olds are being pushed out permanently. That's what happened then. And it's happening all over again, but at a much faster pace. So because it's calculated the way it is, it means that you're not only out there looking for a job, but that you actually don't qualify, but that somebody has to pay for you. So that unemployment rate, that's part of the reason why the unemployment rate was okay. Everyone's like, oh, that unemployment rate's okay. It's because the way it's calculated means that if you're not out there looking for a job, then you don't have to qualify for those unemployment benefits, and therefore they don't have to pay you. And then good, the government can all sit back and say, hey, this is great. Does that make any sense to you? So we're getting excited about fewer unemployment claims, but the reason that they're down is because more people just stop looking for work because their jobs are gone altogether, permanently. They've just given up. And, and this is amazing. When I'm talking about the Senate, Congress has basically just given up. They're walking around like everything's fine. Hey, everything's great. Everything's great. It's insane. They have zero urgency on this. And the problem is that the longer they drag their feet, because like what I just explained to you, the longer it takes to put these jobs back in place. So for every day that they waste not passing a stimulus package or some sort of a Green New Deal or some sort of a massive get back to work package in this country, those jobs are gone and those skills will dry up and those workers will be permanently out of the workforce, unemployed. And so for all of those people who don't want people living off of the government's, dole, so to speak, guess what? You're creating this environment for them to do that perpetually. You don't like entitlement programs, Republicans? You hate Social Security. You hate the welfare state. By not passing a stimulus plan, enabling businesses to keep the lights on, to keep people employed, you are creating your own version of this government, welfare state that's going to continue for years to come. Again, Wall Street doing just fine, small businesses going out of business permanently. They don't have access to the same sort of resources that all of these big companies do. They're having to lay off those employees. Small town America, middle class is being destroyed. No one's talking about it. We knew, though. Here's the big thing to me. I remember cataloging. I have a sort of a media library of sound bites and different quotes from different economists and senators and so forth that goes back months. Before I ever even started doing the show, I had pulled things for our newsletter, et cetera. But we knew about this back in April. So I went to the archives this morning to see, and boy, I had like 4 or 5 different examples from economists and Wall Street experts, quote unquote, who were all saying the same thing, that if Congress doesn't pay attention to this, companies back then had said that 42% of their layoffs would become permanent job losses, permanent layoffs. They were calling for it back in May, right around when Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats were rolling out their heroes package. Did we pay attention to it? Here is Stephen Davis from April. Listen to this interview from April. University of Chicago Booth School. He talked about this specifically back in April, and he was not the only one.
Well, you cited the 42% figure. We got that in 2 parts. First, we surveyed firms in April and asked them, what fraction of your layoffs do you say are permanent? And that number was 23%. A recent household survey by the Washington Post actually got the same number. But then we did something else. We looked back and historically we said, of the layoffs that firms and workers thought were temporary when they happened, how many actually led to recalls? And a good chunk of them never led to recalls. So we put that historical evidence together with the survey evidence from April to come up with our 42% estimate.
42%. They knew this back in April. Surveying all of these companies, large and small, 42% of their layoffs, unless there was some sort of larger stimulus that kept them afloat, they were going to have to lay off 42% of their staff would become permanent layoffs. We knew this. The data was there. And by the way, we heard from the airlines. We heard from a lot of big companies back in June, July, sent a warning to the president and Congress. Hey, American Airlines, United Airlines here, Ford, we're just going to let you know, Boeing, we're going to let you know that we're going to have like 30,000 people we're going to have to go from furloughing to laying off permanently in the fall if you guys don't get past a stimulus plan. That's where we are. Congress doesn't have a stimulus plan. There doesn't seem to be any sense of urgency about it. And you have the New York Times publishing stories where they're recognizing the permanent job loss is a major point of major economic disaster point, and then literally whitewashing the quote from their stories, removing it. No sign of it. Permanent job losses are mounting. There are a large number of people who are being sidelined and could fall out of the labor force, says the New York Times. Good luck trying to find it on their website. You won't be able to find it. New poll out this morning from the AP says that nearly half, this is not a new poll. We knew this in the summer. Here's another example. In July, in an AP poll, nearly half say the job loss to the virus won't return. This is directly during the time when Mitch McConnell was saying we have to put a pause on everything because, everything's looking good right now. Everything's looking good, so we're just going to take a pause and see how this stimulus is really doing in our economy. They don't care about the little guy. They don't. They cared about the big company. They cared about their own donors on Wall Street, the lobbyists who keep them funded so they can keep them in office, and they can keep pumping money into their corporate-backed media overlords on Wall Street. That's all this is. Folks, this is why we need to rise up. We need to make our voices heard. We need to make sure that we're supporting the candidates that support the American people. And I'm not saying that either of these guys right now are that at all. Look towards a green candidate right now. Look independently. And you just want to say maybe Biden's the lesser of two evils these guys are still all bought and sold by big corporations. How much do you think is actually going to change? Wall Street's been fairly muted on who they care as president or not. They're making, they're planning for a Biden presidency right now on Wall Street. But nothing's going to change on Wall Street for those guys. They'll continue to make money hand over fist while the little guy gets crushed. Remember, half of Obama's cabinet was Wall Street. Same is true of Trump. Do you think this stuff ever changes? That's where these millions of dollars come from to support these guys, and nothing ever changes. They do some token little legislation here and there to make us all feel better. But when it comes down to actual numbers, and we see this data right in front of them, they want to ignore it. And the mainstream media, like the New York Times, wanting to whitewash this stuff and knock it right off their front page, hiding these quotes about permanent job loss. Why? You're not going to see any of the mainstream media talking about it. You'll see it right here on this show. And that's why you support local journalism, or that's why you support independent journalism. And I thank you for your support of this show, becoming a channel member, subscribing to our channel, just being a part of our channel, chatting with our channel, leaving comments. It doesn't matter. Subscribing to our free newsletter, just being a part of this community and making sure that you're sharing this message with somebody else. They don't want you to know this. You're not going to flip on MSNBC this afternoon and see it. You won't see it on Fox News. You won't see it anywhere. So thank you so much for supporting the show. Thank you for smashing that like button and becoming a channel subscriber. I really appreciate it. It really means the world to me. And don't forget, please, you can get the free morning newsletter just by going to morninginvest.com, totally free, delivered to your inbox first thing in the morning. We do this show 9 a.m. Eastern time every day. So thank you so much for becoming a part of this great community.